But as of right now, I'm going to pass it to you, David. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone in the cohort. It is an honor just to be able to come and just share a few thoughts with you on the employee life cycle. Today, we're going to just talk about just a little bit about identifying staffing needs. So before I get into that, just to let you know a little bit about me, I own my own executive search and recruiting firm. I have been an instructor working with Enterprise. I don't know, Lindsay, since 2017 or something like that, here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I continue to work with entrepreneurs in this area as well as run my own firm. And it's just really cool that Enterprise has decided to, put this type of programming around the employee life cycle and hiring and recruiting, so that maybe I could be able to add a few insights. So with that, I want to share my screen. And there we go. Can everybody see that? Is that good? Can you see my presentation here? Okay, great. So with that, I don't have too many slides, but let's get into it. So the first thing I want to do, there we go. All right. So here's what we're going to cover over the next, say, half hour or so. And one of the things we're going to do is we're going to talk about where to start as it relates to identifying needs. I'm going to talk to you about something called the value chain. And you may or may not know what that is. But the value chain is one of the tools you could use to sort of figure out where do you need help and where do you need to make plans in order to expand your business. Another thing we'll talk a little bit about is organizational structure. We'll talk about a little bit of HR theory or human resources theory called the AMO model. We'll talk about what employees want. And when we get to that, we're really talking about what you need to provide for them in order to come and be engaged in your organization. I'm going to do a little bit of job analysis and job design. We're going to talk a little bit about that as it relates to how you should look at the roles in your organization, how you should look at putting them together so that you can be able to recruit the best talent. I'm going to talk a little bit about competencies, and this is going to reference some of the information that you'll see, as Lindsay mentioned before, in Module 10. That's one of my favorite ones, or Session 10. That's one of my favorite ones to teach. Key roles to hire, and that's just a suggestion across most businesses. If you have, a product-based business, service-based business, this will be, a suggestion of some of the ones that you want to hire as soon as you can, especially if you're a small business or startup. And then we'll talk about that talent assessment tool, and then we'll give an example. And I'm just going to use myself as an example to show you how you can begin to identify your staffing needs. And that's what we're going to talk about, okay? So here's the first slide. Go back here. There we go. Where to start? So this may seem very straightforward. There's no mystery to this, but I think that before you start thinking about how you're going to staff your organization going forward, first thing you need to do is look at, your mission and your vision. Why do you exist, which is your mission? And then what do you see yourself becoming, which is your vision? All of the things that you do in your organization, all your activities, staffing, creating your product or service, interacting with customers, everything points back to why you exist. Everything points back to what you see yourself becoming. So when you start looking at staffing, for example, you're going to be looking at, in order for us to accomplish why we're here, what are the critical roles that we need in place to get us going in the right direction? So it's always about, hey, where are we going as a company? Where are we going as an organization? Where are we going as a team? And where do we see gaps in our organization, on our team, that we need to fill in order for us to accomplish why we exist? Very straightforward, very quick and sort of easy thing to start with when you start saying, hey, what staffing plans do I need to put in place? Now, I think most of you have been through the first couple of modules in the Streetwise MBA. And somewhere, I think in session 1 or 2, you may have come across this article called The 5 Stages of Business Growth. I think a small business growth is what that is. So when you start talking about staffing, one of the things you can do is look at where your organization is on the spectrum of the 5 stages of business growth. I just listed them here. You are either existing, so you're just getting started and getting going. Surviving, you may have a profit, but you're now really getting to a space where you're starting to see break even and make a little bit of money. Success is, hey, maybe you can pay yourself. Maybe you can, begin to expand your business. Then growth and takeoff, that 4th stage, man, that's exciting. That's when, you really are cooking with gas and clicking on all heels and definitely making great things happen. Your business is growing. You may have your product market fit and all that good stuff going on. So it's starting to take off. And then that last stage, of course, is resource maturity. Without really getting to the article, though, when we start talking about staffing, the staffing you need at each one of these stages is different. The staffing you may need from an existing stage, for example, might just simply be, I just need enough people to keep making stuff so we can sell it until we can be profitable. But then when you get to surviving and you're starting to make some profit, you may say, all right, well, now that I'm making some profit, where are the strategic places that we need help, right? You may need some help with more sales. You may need some help with customer service. Who knows? When you're at a successful level, hopefully at that stage, you pretty much have your basic foundation and have all your functions covered. We'll get a little bit of that later. But once you have all of them covered, then it's a matter of understanding what does your organization look like when it starts to grow? Because when it starts to grow, you're going to start making almost what I would call repeat hires. Not that people are leaving and you're replacing them, but you may say, hey, I hired a salesperson. Well, now I need to repeat by hire another salesperson. Or I've got, a really good brand out there. However, we need to do more marketing. So maybe I need a marketing person. Either way, each one of those stages will definitely help you understand where your staffing needs may be. Okay, so with that, value chain, let's talk about this for a second. With the value chain, this is a concept that helps organizations really understand how they create value, okay? Creating value means you're going to take some raw material or you're going to take some inputs and you're doing something to those inputs in order to create what it is you sell and service, right? So one of the things that I want you to pay attention to is the colored boxes in the model on this slide represent what we call the primary activities. So everybody has, especially if they have a product business or product-based business, you have inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, sales and marketing, or marketing and sales, and service. That's that whole line of activities. That's like the main thing that you do. That's why it's called primary activities. The other activities that support that, things like infrastructure, HR, technology, procurement, those are support activities. Now you may be saying, okay, David, great. Now that I see this, what does that have to do with staffing? Well, as I have on these bullets on the left here, you have to figure out through your value creation, what you do best. What do you do best? If you're a bakery, for example, websites and social media might not be what we call what you do best. What you may do best is a lemon 3-layer cake, right? Or a devil's food chocolate cake or ice cream cake. You may have the best cake in your neighborhood, in your city, in the state where you are. Well, if that is what you do, then that's part of your primary activity. So one of the things when you think about what staffing could be, well, how do I strengthen what I do best as a thought process. That second bullet says, hey, the competitive advantage or your competitive advantage should be staffed by employees. I put that there for a reason. Things like how you make your cakes, for example. You don't want to outsource that. You want to keep that in-house. So when you think about staffing, the things that make you who you are, you want to make sure you have employees, people that work for you doing those types of activities. You don't necessarily want to outsource, for example, your branding and your marketing. You want to hold on to that. You can get some contractors or some agencies to help you with collateral or help you with, the different materials you use for marketing, but the actual marketing strategy and brand strategy, that belongs to you. And that's one of the places where you may want to think about, for example, having some employees full-time working for you. And the last bullet here says outsource non-value added activities. Exactly. Things in the support activities of this model. Those are some areas where you may say, hey, if I'm limited on funds, I don't necessarily want to bring in employees in those areas. I may want to partner with someone or connect with some other businesses and go in together and do some collective buying of those types of services, right? So anything non-value added that does not add to who you are as an organization or what you make, those are the things that you want to consider outsourcing. But the stuff that you do that makes you who you are, keep that and then look at getting the right help in those areas. Okay. Another thing you got to think about too, when you think about staffing, is how are you structured? And this slide speaks to all sorts of organizations. For example, a functional structure where you have sales separated from marketing, separated from ops or operations, separated from finance, separated from legal, for example. That's a functional structure, and each function kind of takes care of itself. A divisional structure, you're probably a larger organization, so you have a division in the South, you have a division in the North, you have a division in the West. So they have their own type of structure where they may decide to do things maybe differently, just depending on how your organization runs and how you want it to be able to grow in the future. Where most of us probably are on maybe the last four types of structures, where you talk about a simple structure where there's not really a leadership layer. There's you, the business owner, and then everybody that works for you. So you're the leader. But as far as a layer under you, that may or may not be there. So you may just have a simple structure. Everybody's got a job, they come to work, and you as the owner bear the brunt of the risk as well as the brunt of, making sure that things kind of come together. The matrix structure, basically, different groups or different functions within a company, and you can kind of, cross collaborate. And when you cross collaborate, you get resources from different spots that don't necessarily report to you. So that's the matrix one. Team structure, pretty much a lot of our entrepreneurs use the team structure and really the network structure, where it's 6 of you, and that is the structure of your organization. So as you grow it, you want to continue to, collaborate with each other, but at the same time, it's pretty much a flat organization. Most of the entrepreneurs that we work with really have a flat organization, and that's a good thing. But how you staff it basically depends on where you're going and what's the most important thing for you in order to grow. And then the network structure, we talked about outsourcing. So that means you have some things that are under your roof, and then you have some things outside. Now, staffing, when you start looking at your structure, right, depends on where you want to have the most help or need the most help, but definitely how are you structured in those different functions in your organization, and where do people sit? Where do people, kind of have their space to work together, and who makes decisions? The structure is really all about that decision making. Okay, so let's do maybe 1 or 2 slides here of just a little bit of theory. And this theory is not, very, very complicated PhD stuff. It's just things for you to think about as you begin to think about staffing. So this first one, this is from the perspective of you, the employer, and thinking about staffing and how you're going to provide a certain kind of opportunity, if you will, or really an environment for you to get the best talent. So this model comes from the HR space. And what they basically said is this: you as an employer, if you're able to provide the ability, the opportunity, and motivation to an employee, you're setting yourself up for success. So let's kind of go through that quickly. The ability means that you can have a person who comes in and says, hey, I can do the job, whatever that job is. They have skills and they have knowledge. And we'll talk about competencies real quick a little bit later. But when you set up the job, if a person has the ability to do it, that's what that means, right? And then the opportunity, are they allowed to do it? So that gets into the work design in the organization itself, which was why we went through structure. So you go hire somebody who may have skills and knowledge, but then if they are not put in the right place to be able to execute on that, then you're probably going to get suboptimal results. And then the last thing is motivation. Do they actually want to do the job? And there are intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Cash, that's extrinsic. Benefits, that's extrinsic. Vacation, that's extrinsic. But let's talk about intrinsic on the very next slide, which is this guy. So this is what people want as far as the employee side. What I just showed you is more of the employer side, what you should be providing, but this is what people actually want. Now, this comes from a great book, and I would suggest that you get this. Daniel Pink wrote a book called Drive. You'll notice that book if you ever go to a bookstore on Amazon. It's yellow, very bright book with red writing on it. But in the book, he talks about what drives people to do what they do, whatever that is, whether that's a job, whether that's, some kind of passion or whatever it is. And at the end of the day, you as the employer need to be able to, engage with employees through these three things. If you provide purpose, the ability for them to align the work that you have with who they are and why they exist, right? That's a good thing. Also, you must provide in any kind of role that you have mastery. And mastery simply means ability to grow in the role. So if you align their purpose with what they're doing and you provide a way for them to grow in the role, that's a good thing. And then that last piece, I said something about autonomy before, but even in this book, they talk about giving people the ability to make decisions, giving them some scope around their responsibilities so that they can operate within that without having someone tell them what to do on every step of the way. Having all three of those in any role that you create basically allows the person to not only come into the role intrinsically, but it also allows them to engage in a totally different way. So as you're thinking about staffing, the whole reason we look at this is for you to think about, are you providing in the employment opportunity that you have these things so that when people come, they can definitely experience it and also give you their best performance. Okay. I'm going to speed up a little bit. Let's talk about job analysis and design. Now, when you talk about staffing, here are 6 things you want to think about when you are creating opportunities for people to come join your organization. Later on in the week, we'll talk about the recruiting. We'll talk about, the kind of things you need to do in order to go find the people. But before you do that, what you want to do is definitely make sure that as you're creating the jobs that you want to go find people to come and actually apply for, that you have a couple of pieces there for those opportunities that make sense. All right. The first one is task significance. So when we talk about a job really is going to be a collection of tasks that you do every day, as a simple construct. So task significance really gets to, well, in the job, are there things that align with company objectives? Remember, we started with the mission and the vision, right? And we talked about the stages of growth. So as you're designing the job, the question is, do you have people doing stuff that aligns with who you are and what you're supposed to be doing? So that's task significance. Task identity within a job basically says there is a start and an end to each task. Now that sounds simple, but really what it is you can actually use that to determine whether the job is being completed. So make sure that you have clear identities of tasks within the job, and the jobs have significance as it relates to what the company's objectives are. Again, there's that word autonomy again. I know it's showing up on multiple slides, but one of the things you definitely want to do is make sure that the employee has autonomy in completing the task. You don't want them to be robots. You want them to be able to come in and actually contribute based on the gifts that they have to your organization. Variety in the role, I'm not going to even talk about that. No one wants to come in and do the same thing every day, all day, without any variety. That is not going to last long. All of us are human, and we need to have some variety in what we do. The environment, make sure that you have a good environment in your organization to be able to complete tasks within the role. And then last but not least, feedback. Feedback is a very important thing. So the feedback helps understand, number one, if the job is being completed in the right way. And feedback also helps you with improvement or continuous improvement, really. So you need to make sure you design feedback into the system of the role that you're creating for your staffing. All right. So what I tried to do here is just give you a visual of what job analysis and design kind of looks like at a high level. So for example, you're the founder and owner of a business. When you started it, it was just maybe you. Maybe it was you and two other people. Who knows? Or one other person, or maybe 10 people. I don't know. But when you started the business, your job was pretty much all of the jobs, all of the tasks that had to be done. That was you. And I see some smiles across all the folks that are on this call saying, yeah, I remember that. Exactly. So when you start talking about, staffing, right? Staffing becomes, well, how do I now take the tasks that I'm doing, especially the ones I don't do that well, and now create a role that has those tasks in it that makes sense for someone with the right competency to come into and execute. So a lot of us are starting like this. And in our example, I'm actually going to use myself using this visual to kind of show you when we start talking about staffing, what that might look like. If you've taken session 10, great. If you haven't, you're going to see this in session 10. We started talking about human resources. One of the things you want to do with your staffing plan and your job design is to look at competencies. And we define competencies in the Streetwide MBA this way. A competency is a combination of knowledge, skills, and abilities. KSA. Knowledge, facts, data, protocols, and information. Anybody can get knowledge. You can go to school and get that. You can go to YouTube and get a lot of knowledge, right? And that's very important to have. But then there's also skills, which are demonstrated actions that you know what you're doing in that role. So between knowledge and skills, that's where a lot of people kind of stop when they start doing their staffing and their recruiting. Hey, they got a degree. They can do X, Y, Z. Great. That's awesome. But the missing piece of that, which is really interesting when you start talking about staffing, is the abilities. And what abilities are things that people sometimes don't even learn in school. They just kind of come with it. If you are an engineer or a software kind of person, one of the abilities you may have is just simply being curious. And being curious and being a problem solver is something that you're not necessarily taught, but it's something that a person with that ability coming into that role might make that role successful. So when you start talking about knowledge, skills, and abilities, all together, those are competencies. So when you design your jobs through the analysis of the job and then the design of it so that you can go out and hire somebody, you want to keep these in mind. Okay. generically across most companies, these are like the 6 top roles you want to make sure that you're staffing for, especially if you're a startup or a small business. This could change depending on the industry you're in, but at a high level, you definitely need a person to lead your product and service development, whether you're building boxes and widgets or stuff like that, or if you provide, hair care or whatever kind of service it might be. Somebody needs to own that. Somebody needs to own your marketing. We talked about branding and messaging and social media and all that great stuff. Someone needs to own that. Someone needs to own sales, because sales is the reason you're going to grow. I mean, you can't grow without sales, and you need somebody to head that up. Definitely need somebody to run your customer service, figure out your feedback that's coming back when people buy your product or service. Use that to help guide what product or service changes and updates you're going to make, as well as how well you're doing with your marketing and sales. And of course, you need accounting and finance, somebody to make sure you count the books, count the money and look at the books and make sure they're clean. And then also the human resources lead, which is the person that makes sure that you got the right talent in the right place at the right time, and also can help you with future needs in this space. So this is pretty generic. It's not a hard list for anybody to take and just run with, but it is something for you to think about overall as it relates to staffing. Okay, this is a tool that's also in the Streetwide MBA that we talk about when we're looking at staffing. And this is one that you would definitely use. And in this case, basically what it does is it says, hey, if this is a role that you are staffing for, you list the key competencies that you want to have for that role. You then talk about the business growth priority. So how important is this role to the growth of your organization? Then you talk about the development and training needs. You must provide ways for employees to be trained to develop skills in the role, even once they have the role. Remember that model we talked about where in Daniel Peek's book, he said you must have or provide the ability to experience mastery of the job. Well, development and training needs, you want to list those so that people understand what they need to do to master that particular role. And then the last thing is the strategies and ideas and options that you have in order to make this work. So with that, I think I've got an example. Yes. So I'm going to talk about myself, because when I talk about myself in presentations, I don't have to worry about getting sued. So with that, and that was a joke, but with that, I'm going to talk about me. So I own a recruiting firm, right? And right now it is me, myself, and I. That is the trifecta of leadership with the DEJ group, my firm. So what I'm looking at is, in doing my own staffing, is looking at the different tasks that I do. As you see here, I do the business development, I do the sourcing of talent, I do the interviewing, I do the administrative work, I do the social media and marketing, and I do tech support. So I do all of those in my one job, working for myself and in my organization. So when I start thinking about staffing, the first thing I was thinking about is, what do I want to keep? And then what do I not want to keep? So for me, I absolutely love actually doing the business development part of the work for my firm. I love meeting people, doing new deals, getting new contracts out, proposals, stuff like that. So I like that. And maybe that makes me weird, crazy, but I just like that part of my job. And then the marketing and social media stuff, I like that as well. So for me, I'm saying I would like to keep those pieces. But then when I look at employee number one outside of me, I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe if I could find someone who can source talent, which basically says go find the talent in different sources and do some of the profiling and finding folks who can come and basically be in a slate or a part of a slate for my clients. And I might want that person to do the interviewing. I like doing the interviewing too, and I am good at that. However, I said, well, which one would make sense for me as the owner to do more of and add more value to? The interviewing or the business development? Well, the business development makes it so we actually have a business and I have cash. So that one I want to do a little bit more of, but then I can get somebody to do some of the interviewing and the sourcing. And I also can get someone to do the administrative work. In this case, this would be scheduling interviews with candidates and clients, scheduling meetings as far as the business development meetings where I go and try to figure out if I can win business, any kind of reviews, any kind of anything else that I need, I could have somebody do that. And then, of course, the tech support thing could be outsourced. Even though I have 25 years of IT and engineering experience, I don't necessarily want to do that to grow my business. It doesn't add as much value as opposed to the business development and, for example, the sourcing and interviewing. So that's a way that you could use that as an example of seeing how you can start your staffing plan. And then, so when I started talking about the talent assessment tool that I shared with you, I used that for those roles. And I said, basically, well, if I get a recruiter or sourcer, I need them to have communication as a competency, sales, and be able to close deals. It's high business growth priority for sure, because the more that I can recruit and source and do that well, when I do deals, I can say, hey, I really am good at that. Development and training needs, oh, well, yeah, we need somebody to be able to source and recruit talent. So whatever they need to do to learn and do that better, we put that in their development plan. And then my strategy for that was to really just find a salesperson and then send them maybe to a couple of conferences. SHRM is a Society for Human Resource Management. I'm a member of that. And then, maybe some LinkedIn learning so that they learn how to do better with recruiting and sourcing. Same thing with the virtual assistant on the admin side. Those are the competencies they need as far as knowing Microsoft Office, scheduling, project management. And then what I need them to do is be able to coordinate interviews and business meetings. And if that's a training or development thing, let's make sure we give them what they need. And then I said here for strategies, check out Upwork to find a virtual assistant. There are several platforms out there where you can find, folks that are looking for work. And we'll get into that tomorrow. But for example, Upwork or Fiverr or some of those are where you could go find people to do certain tasks and actually maybe hire them, especially if it's virtual. So with that, I'm actually done. And here's what I want you to make sure you take away from our time together. The first thing is make sure you align your staffing needs with your mission and vision of your company. It always starts with what you do as far as why you exist and who you serve. Make sure you align those with that. Recognize where you are on the growth spectrum and go after talent to help you go to the next level. So that gets back to the 5 stages of growth. Are you just getting started? Well, maybe you don't need the HR person yet. You might need somebody that actually helps you develop the product. Well, that's where you start to work and try to find those folks. But then again, you may be at a stage where you've got, some decent sales, you got some net income going on, and you got your functions as far as all of those 6 roles that I mentioned earlier. Maybe you got those covered. Well, the next thing is, well, if you're at $1 million, how do you get to 2? Does that mean you got to hire more salespeople? Does that mean you need more customer service folks? Do you need to build more products? So those are the things you have to decide when you're going forward with that. That'll help you with your staffing plan. You got to analyze your current jobs and design jobs that appeal to top talent. Absolutely. Sometimes you can look at a job in your organization and say, you know what would happen if I took some tasks from some other jobs, put it into this job, and removed a few from that? What would that look like? Well, that might actually create a unique opportunity that differentiates you from others out there. And that may actually attract top talent to come to your organization. Be clear on your competencies you need in a role to be successful. Absolutely. Make sure that you have clearly defined what that role needs to be successful so you can articulate that when you market the role so that you get the right people. And then, of course, use tools like I just showed you, the talent assessment tool, plan your future resources. So with all of that, what questions do you have?